We've had a few questions asked on the Fen and Fishing TV about what rods that I use and for what situation, so we're going to cover that today. So we've talked about hooks and feeders that I tend to use for natural fishing. We've had a few questions asked on the Fen and Fishing TV about what rods that I use and for what situation, so we're going to cover that today. What I will stress is the rods I use are top end match rods by Daiwa. They are the best, they're fantastic rods, but what I will say is not everyone can afford to have top of the range rods. So when looking to buy a rod, when you go to the tackle shop, know what budget you got. There's rods from 50 quid to 400 quid. So what I will say is if you're looking for a rod for natural venues, you know, like middle level, drain fishing, general casts up to about 40-50 meters, there's tons and tons of rods from 50 quid to 150 quid that will suit that. Daiwa do a brilliant ends on S range, which is sort of around 90 to 130 quid. Preston do like a super feeder range, which is 70 to 80 quid for that sort of natural venue fishing. And I mean like natural skimmers, roach, that sort of thing, up to 40 meters. There's lots and lots of rods. The reason why I use Daiwa tournament rods is I do have a lot of rods, but these rods I can use for any style of my fishing, depending on what length. So I use 10-11 foots, whether I'm fishing here at Rookery Waters for carp, fishing little methods to islands, that sort of thing, or if I want to use it for straight lead fishing for carp, I can use it for short chuck fishing on reservoirs and natural venues for roach and skimmers. I can use it on middle level. It's 400 quid rod, but it covers 3 or 4 different rods, if you see what I'm trying to explain. That's why I use tournament rods, different tips, they're just fantastic. So the first rod I'm going to talk about then is the tournament 10 to 11. Now I use this rod for basically middle level, fishing for small skimmers up to sort of £1.5 £2. It'll cope with bream, and short chuck for roach, or like I say, commercial fishing. So the first setup is if we're going to be fishing middle level for skimmers. So it's set up at 11 foot. This rod does 2 lengths. It does 10 or 11. There's a short piece there which I can remove depending on what I'm fishing for and how far I'm chucking. So with all my natural venues, I use braid. 90% of the venues you're allowed to use braid. If you're allowed to use it, use it. The next thing, I've got a meter shock leader. Now you might say, normally with braid you have sort of the length of your rod and a couple of reel turns on your reel for your shock leader. Now rods are so much softer now, the braid's so much better, everything is better now. You don't need as much shock leader when you're only chucking 30-40 meters. Just a 1 meter shocker is all I have. So the shock leader I'm using is Daiwa ST, and for this job it's, just put that there, it's £8. Now if I was chucking further, I'll probably go up to like a £10 ST. Now this, for skimmers, I feel more confident in fishing the traditional paternoster. So the reason why it's a paternoster is your feeder is directly away from your hook length. So when a skimmer or bream pulls away, they're not pulling against the weight of the feeder, they're pulling directly on your tip. So it shows up more. For skimmers, it's the best way. And the key thing is, when you're tying your paternoster, make sure that this piece here is pushing away from your feeder, because if it's coming back towards your feeder, you're just going to get tangles. So the key thing when you're tying your paternoster is to keep it so it pushes away from your feeder. Now the next little piece is a Daiwa ends on quick chain swivel. They've been around for quite a while now. Neat little things, just a little hook like a connector in your pole, so you can change hook lengths. You know, if you're missing a few bites, you can shorten it down, keep shortening it down until you start hitting every bite. And that's a setup you could use for big bream, skimmers, anything. For middle level and those sort of venues up to sort of 40 meters, that is the setup I use. nice short, small but heavy feeder, so it goes in nice and tight on your clip, and you can tighten straight up to it, and it shows all the little indications off them skimmers. When you're fishing middle level, you get lots of little pockets of fish come in your peg, and you've got to make the most of those little runs. So that's that set up. Right, so the next rod again is a tournament. This setup is for if I was fishing the Bure or Thurn, tidal rivers but small, not pacey. And this is your 12-13, and I've taken the 1 foot section out of there, so this is 12 foot. Again, braid is 010 absolute feeder braid. It's a reddy colour, but it sinks really well, and this braid's probably 1.5 years, 2 years old now, and it's not showing anywhere whatsoever. So this is really direct. When you're fishing for these skimmers on the Bure and the Thurn, you're fishing small feeders, little parcels of bait going to the bottom really regularly, and you're not fishing long hook lengths because they're quite aggressive. They're coming up your peg looking for the food. So hook length wise, I've probably got what there, 18 inches I suppose, and a size 12 LS22R, which is the red Gamakatsu, and that's a big hook. It's a 12. Normally I'll skimmer fishing on the drains where it's a bit clearer and they've got more time to look at the bait. I tend to go for a smaller hook, but on the Bure and the Thurn, they're coloured, the fish are really aggressive. I fish a bigger hook because you can get away with it, and you hit more bites with a bigger hook. So we're using sort of worm heads, double maggot, that sort of thing. Now the actual setup is a helicopter setup, and what we've got is we've got a twisted loop and then a snap link swivel on the end of it. So if I take the feeder off, you can see that there, it's real nice and stiff. And that just acts like a little boom and keeps everything away from this hook length. Now this hook length is a helicopter because it spins round and round, so you get no tangles. The other thing is, because you're fishing with your tip up in the air, you're nice and direct. And as you can see there, it's straight on the back of this feeder. So if you can imagine, that's the feeder on the bottom, and your rod's up in the air like that, the fish are pulling straight on your tip again. Even though you're nice and tight, like so, you see in every single indication on the tip. And for skimmers on the Bure and the Thurn, I found that the best rig. I mean, you could use a paternoster, but I don't know, with the flow and that, I feel more confident in this. It doesn't tangle, and that little twisted loop there acts as like a little boom and keeps everything away from that feeder. I mean, I've even fished hook lengths like this short, like on a little dink rig, and so your hook bait's really close to your feeder because they are aggressive. So again, that there is 8 pound ST shock leader meter, so I'm nice and direct, chucking in, plopping it in. As soon as it hits the bottom, I'm tightening up straight to it, so I'm seeing every little indication, every little drop back, and you're straight in control with the fish. So that's the 12-13, but set at 12 foot. Put that one back on there. That one on there. Right. So this next rod is the same rod, 12-13, but on venues like Ireland, where you're fishing natural locks, you could use this setup for proper bream fishing on the drains, Tamar. This is what I would use for sort of up to 60 metres. It's a nice soft rod, but it's got a lot of beans through here, so you can chuck a 60-gram feeder and be really accurate in the wind. Reel wise, like on all of them, they're ballistic 6000s. They're not the biggest size, but they're sort of a happy medium. And for me, they've got quite a bit of winding power. So let's talk you down. Again, I've got a meter shock leader because I'm not chucking to the horizon with this one. And basically, it's the same setup. So it's a helicopter rig. I've got a window feeder on this time because they're more accurate. I'm casting a little bit further. Again, everything's direct. Shows every indication, whether you're fishing for roach, skimmers, hybrids. It's just tangle free. That's why the helicopter rig is so popular now, because it's tangle free. It's not necessarily the best rig, but for tangles and stuff like that, it's spot on. So that's that set up. Put that out of the way. Right. Then if I was fishing venues like Ferry Meadows, or I'm chucking past 60 metres, I then step it all up, and it's a different setup now. So we've got a cast-ism reel, and that's got 08 braid. I deliberately haven't gone for a thicker braid because when you're casting distance, obviously that 08 goes through the air a little bit and just cuts through the surface tension when I'm sinking the line. So this rig is what they call a twisted loop rig. So back to the shock leader. This is a 7 metre shock leader. It basically, if I go to load the feeder up, I've got 2 turns of my shock leader on here, ready to smash it out as far as I can. Rod wise, I've got a 12 for SLR, I've got 13 for SLRs as well. Brilliant rods. You could use these for commercial carping like Boddington, Barston, those sort of venues where you're chucking a big method feeder. But this has got the softer tip in today. That's the 1.5 ounce tip, and that's perfect for hybrids in Ireland or if you're fishing long range for bream. So you could use a helicopter rig, and a lot of anglers do use a helicopter rig past, you know, at distance fishing. But I just prefer this running setup, this twisted loop rig. I don't have any problems with it tangling, and for bream I just find it, you know, if you're fishing at distance, when the tip goes round, you're not getting many bites, you want to know that the fish is going to be on. So that's a small Guru shock rig sleeve there, and that basically just offsets the twisted loop. So when you tie your loop, if your loop's pointing downwards like this, you're just going to get tangles. But if you can see with that there, if the camera can pick that up or not, but my twisted loop is going up towards the sky. That's how you want it. So it's directly away from the feeder. Again, like we talked about with the paternoster. The way that I haven't got a snap link quick chain swivel in there, just for the simple fact I want just a loop to loop with this, and I'm normally fishing probably metre shock leaders. I can drag it about, I can, especially with window feeder, I do like to move my tip quite a bit and drag the bait around, because you're normally fishing over quite a big area. I mean, I don't care who you are, you can't be extremely accurate 70-80 metres every cast, so it's not like you're fishing on a dinner plate. So that's that setup. Hook length wise, I'd use probably 018, 016. I wouldn't fish any lighter than that, because when you're chucking that far, you don't want to be in tangles. You're chucking it out, leaving it for 15-20 minutes before you get a bite. You want to know that your rig's exactly right and it's presented right. Feeder wise, for that distance, I use window feeders, whether it's the Guru ones, Preston do one, Dennett's, there's plenty to choose from. They cast absolutely brilliantly. So they're my ranges of rods that I use for most things. What I will say is, for natural venues, when you're using braid, especially at distance, I use a line sink. Maver do one, Garbolino do a brilliant one. Before every session, give it a good shake and just spray it onto your, that's not worked very well there, but spray it onto your spools, and that helps it cut through the surface tension. And if, for example, say I've been fishing with one rod and I'm picking the next rod up, just before I pick the next rod up, I've always got my atomizer with me. Just spray it straight on the spool, keep it wet, it stops all your wing knots and it helps it sink. So little tip, always have atomizer if you're using braid. It solves all the tangles, all the problems, and makes your line sink faster. Going back to shock leaders, I like the Preston Revelation hook boxes. Keep all my feeder hook lengths. As you can see, I've got different lengths for different scenarios. I've got some tapered shock leaders there. I've got all my different setups that I use for different venues, all in there, nice and easy. Just mark it up, and it's all nice and compact in one place. So hopefully we've explained the way I do things. Obviously it's not always the right way, but I try and make things simple in my fishing, and hopefully you can learn a few things.